In the depth of winter, I finally learned that within me there lay an invincible summer. These aren't just beautiful words, they're a declaration of war against despair. They were written by Albert Camus, a writer, philosopher, and one of the most profoundly human voices of the 20th century. Today, we're going to explore the mind of this incredible thinker, a man who stared into the abyss of a meaningless universe and, instead of falling, taught us all how to fly. Camus wasn't born into a world of philosophy books and intellectual debates. Born in 1913 in French Algeria, his world was one of sun, sand, and struggle. He grew up in poverty, a world away from the fancy salons of Paris. His father was killed in World War I when Camus was just a baby, leaving his mother, who was partially deaf and illiterate, to raise him and his brother by working as a cleaner. This wasn't a life of privilege. It was a life of quiet hardship, of watching his mother's silent, tireless work. But it was from this very soil of struggle that one of the most resilient and beautiful philosophies would grow. He understood early on that life wasn't always fair, and that the world didn't owe us any explanations. This first-hand experience with hardship didn't make him bitter. It made him observant, compassionate, and deeply attuned to the raw, unfiltered experience of being alive. Now, when you hear the name Camus, you might think existentialism, and picture him in a smoky cafe alongside Jean-Paul Sartre, discussing the bleakness of existence. But that's a common misconception. In fact, Camus himself rejected the label existentialist. While he explored similar themes, freedom, choice, and the search for meaning, his conclusions were radically different. Where some saw despair in a godless, meaningless universe, Camus saw something else entirely: liberation. He started with a question that many of us are afraid to even ask. What if life has no inherent purpose? What if there's no grand cosmic plan? For Camus, this wasn't a cause for panic. It was the starting point. The moment we accept this fundamental truth, he argued, is the moment our lives can truly begin. This brings us to his most famous and perhaps most misunderstood idea, the absurd. To understand it, let's look at his brilliant essay, The Myth of Sisyphus. In Greek mythology, Sisyphus is a king condemned by the gods for all eternity. His punishment, to push a massive boulder up a steep hill, only to watch it roll back down to the bottom every single time he nears the top. A cruel fate, a pointless, repetitive, soul-crushing task. It's the ultimate metaphor for a meaningless life, right? We work, we strive, we struggle, and for what? To start all over again the next day. But here is where Camus performs a philosophical miracle. He looks at Sisyphus, sweating and straining, and he doesn't see a defeated victim. He sees a hero. Why? Because Sisyphus is fully conscious of his fate. He knows the boulder will roll back down. He knows his labor is, from a cosmic perspective, futile, and yet, he chooses to push. He walks back down the hill, watches the rock settle, and begins again. In that conscious act of defiance, in that decision to continue despite the pointlessness of it all, Sisyphus finds his freedom. Camus concludes with one of the most powerful lines in all of philosophy. The struggle itself toward the heights is enough to fill a man's heart. One must imagine Sisyphus happy. This is the core of the absurd. The clash between our human desire for meaning and order, and the cold, silent, indifferent universe that offers none. But Camus tells us not to run from this clash. He tells us to live within it, to embrace it. True freedom isn't found in finding a purpose, but in creating our own in the face of purposelessness. This idea echoes powerfully in his novels. Take his groundbreaking book, The Stranger. The main character, Meursault, is a man who seems detached from everything. The book opens with the famous line, "Mother died today, or maybe yesterday. I can't be sure." He doesn't cry at her funeral. He doesn't play the social games we all play to fit in. He lives with a radical, almost disturbing honesty. He refuses to pretend to feel things he doesn't feel. Society, of course, can't handle this. They see his honesty as monstrous. During his trial for a senseless act of violence, it's not the crime itself that truly condemns him, but his refusal to show remorse, his refusal to lie about his feelings. Society calls him a monster. Camus, however, sees him as a man who is tragically, defiantly free. Meursault is an absurd hero because he refuses to accept the artificial meanings that society tries to force upon him. He lives and dies by his own truth, however uncomfortable it may be. But Camus' philosophy isn't just about individual rebellion. It's also deeply rooted in solidarity and compassion. This is most beautifully illustrated in his novel, The Plague. On the surface, it's a story about a city in Algeria, Oran, that is suddenly quarantined due to a deadly outbreak of bubonic plague. People are trapped, separated from their loved ones, living in constant fear of death. But the novel, written during the Nazi occupation of France in World War II, is a powerful allegory. The plague isn't just a disease. It's fascism, it's totalitarianism, it's any force that tries to crush the human spirit. And how do the characters respond? Some despair, some try to profit. But the heroes of the story are the ordinary people who choose to fight back. Dr. Ryu, the narrator, works tirelessly to treat the sick, not because of some grand religious or political belief, but simply because it's the decent thing to do. He and others form sanitation squads, risking their lives to help their fellow citizens. They find their purpose not in a divine plan, but in their shared struggle against a common enemy. The plague shows that even when the world collapses into chaos and meaninglessness, our commitment to each other, our simple human decency, is what keeps us human. It's here we find Camus' other great rallying cry: I rebel. Therefore, I exist. This isn't just a rebellion against political tyranny, but a rebellion against indifference, a rebellion against despair itself. Camus lived by these principles. He was an active member of the French resistance against the Nazis, editing a clandestine newspaper. He stood against the oppressive regimes of his time, whether they were fascist or communist, always championing the individual against the crushing weight of ideology. He was a man of action, not just words. When people tried to label him a great philosopher, he would often smile and say, I am not a philosopher, I am an artist who loves life. And that's what shines through all his work, a passionate, unwavering love for life, in all its absurd, beautiful, and tragic glory. Tragically, Camus' own life was cut short. In 1960, at the age of just 46, he died in a car accident. He had just won the Nobel Prize in Literature 3 years earlier, becoming the second youngest recipient in history. In the wreckage of the car, they found the manuscript for his unfinished novel, The First Man, an autobiographical work about his childhood in Algeria, his search for his father, and his deep connection to his silent, hard-working mother. It was a final, poignant reminder of the life that fueled his incredible mind. But a voice like Camus' never truly dies. His ideas are more relevant today than ever. In a world saturated with information yet starved of meaning, where we often feel like Sisyphus pushing our own boulders of daily tasks, Camus offers a lifeline. He gives us permission to stop searching for a preordained purpose and instead focus on living as fully, passionately, and authentically as possible. He reminds us that meaning isn't something we find, it's something we create, moment by moment, through our choices, our rebellions, and our connections with others. The purpose, as he saw it, is simply to live life as beautifully as possible. So the next time you feel lost in the absurdity of it all, the next time the world feels cold and indifferent, remember Albert Camus. Remember the boy from the dusty streets of Algeria who taught the world that even in the deepest, darkest winter, we can find an invincible summer waiting inside ourselves. Thank you so much for watching. If this exploration of Camus' philosophy resonated with you, please hit that like button, and consider subscribing for more journeys into the minds of great thinkers. Let me know in the comments which of Camus' ideas you find most powerful. Stay curious, and I'll see you in the next video.